Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, sexual energy as a leadership issue. And that's part of an extended discussion with Joe Lightfoot. Now, before you turn off in horror, it might not be quite what you're thinking. Joe describes herself as being the 3 Ps: professional speaker, property investor, and podcaster. I'll also talk a little bit about my week of introverts torture. And question of the week: do introverts ask more questions? There's only one news item that caught my eye this week. Well, which is any different to the ongoing Partygate saga, that is. Rare plants accidentally sold at Lidl and B&Q are so valuable that a leaf could be worth thousands. Apparently, small, naturally occurring variations in common plants can make them extremely valuable. Among others, a regular Swiss cheese plant with variegated leaves. The signs can be subtle, apparently, in young plants, and shops often mix them up with the plain variety and sell them for a tenner, when even a small branch of the plant could end up costing thousands, with Etsy's most popular one listed at £4,562.18. But what's more, these variations are sometimes mistaken for disease, and the shops sell the plants at a reduced price. Sounds to me that some people need to be getting better at spotting real value and understanding what they're looking at. It's a bit like an office I've been working in the last couple of weeks, where the leader told me that he needed to get rid of 2 of his staff as they were too quiet. We chatted, and he came to realise the value of the input they could give, if only he created the conditions for them to add to the team discussions. In many firms, chattier extroverts get all the airtime, but when that's managed better, the whole team improves. The format of this show is slightly different this week, in that the discussion with Joe is longer than normal, because I'm not around. As you listen to this, I'm subjecting myself to a fortnight of introvert torture. I'll update you about that afterwards. I'm on a ski trip with 50 other business owners and professional speakers, where there's breakfast till long after dinner, networking, discussions, and many of the group are, of course, extroverts. I am employing all 3 survival tactics that I often talk about. In particular, I have no doubt that the special introvert recovery room will be in use as the week progresses. It's a room which most conference centres provide, where there's a small cubicle and a chair with a hole in the middle. All joking aside, I'm actually having a brilliant time so far, although there are times when my people energy is dropping out of existence. Let's have a chat with Joe. Hi Joe, how you doing?
Very well, thank you, John. How are you doing?
Always good here, thank you. We're going to talk a lot about your tagline and what you do, which is, I love the tagline, perform all that you are, and you help people to do that. But just before we get into that, are you an introvert, an extrovert, and what does it mean? What does that mean to you?
Now, you got me thinking about this so hard recently when I saw you talking to where you and I were speaking sort of alongside one another, and you talked about introversion and you talked about your experience of introversion. And in my head, I have always described myself as an extrovert. I've always been bubbly, outgoing, chatty, social butterfly, all of those things. So for me, I sat firmly on the extrovert end of the spectrum. But the more and more I listened to you talk, the more and more I realized how much I identified with what you were saying around what gives me energy. And I think deep down, I've always known it. But what I've realized is so much of me is an introvert. And I found it quite uncomfortable being sat somewhere between the two. Because again, it sort of put me in this kind of, well, you're either one or the other. You can't just float around and be a bit of both, because that's a bit convenient.
Oh, yes, you can.
Turns out you
absolutely.
can. Yeah.
You are what you are, Joe.
Yeah. And I think this is it. And, my message to people about performing all you are resonated with your message about being aware of where you sit on that spectrum. And the realization was that I am a mix of both elements. So I find it fascinating that you can be both. It genuinely hadn't occurred to me before.
Yeah. People learn tactics to help them to be where they need to be at different times. And that, I think, as you said, because I loved your presentation, loved listening to your discussion about energy levels, which is why we're having this discussion today. You're absolutely right. There's a link between the two. At my core, I am an introvert, but most people see me as an extrovert because they see me jumping up and down on stage. It's about channeling energy when I need to. I want to step back from that then. Your statement, perform all that you are. What does that actually mean?
Oh, it's such a big statement. So for me, there are 3 elements to it. I use the framework of a rainbow for many reasons, which I won't bore your listeners with, but every single human being has their own unique spectrum of color. And what I mean by that is their own personality type, their own life experiences, their own talents, skills, passions, energy, abilities. And we are just this beautiful, unique, one of a kind rainbow that's just rare and walking around on this planet. But the sad thing is, most people don't tap into their own colors on a regular basis. And if you don't do that, you're not really aligned with all that you are, which means you can't perform all that you are. You can't perform at your best. And there's 3 elements to that process of performing all you are. The first is to look within and know what your colors are. That's the first thing. The second element is to accept that those are your colors. And I think introversion and extroversion is certainly part of that. You might have thought you were one thing, but actually it turns out you're another. Well, it's about accepting that. And then the third element is putting all that you are into practice and performing all you are in whatever your endeavor is. Whether it's business, whether it's in your family life, or whatever success you choose to have.
If we want to perform better, let's run with the business end of it for a second. The first thing we've got to be aware of is what our colours are, accept them, and then we can move forward. What do you mean about colours? Do you mean you're one of these people that sits there with pretty colour charts and tells John he's got to wear orange makeup, or
oh yeah,
is it something different?
Listen, John, if that's your flavour, you go for it. So your colours, I don't like to prescribe them too much because I think then it negates my message of being unique. So I work with clients one-to-one if I'm coaching and mentoring them. And the first sort of session is always about doing an audit of their colours. And it's about them just literally giving me their life story based on questions that I ask about their likes, dislikes, natural talents, abilities, what they were good at as a kid. It's always a big one that comes up. What they love spending their time doing, things that make them smile, things that make them sad, what they do for a living, what their life experiences are, what their passions are, what gives them energy. And we go through this set of questionings. And at the end, you've got a rainbow. You've got a rainbow of somebody. And then if we're looking at it in a business context, because often the reason people come to me is because they're feeling like they've lost their mojo, or life's gone a bit black and white, or they're just in a sea of grey and they've lost themselves. And it's about bringing that color, that rainbow that they've identified into their business. So how do they do that? Well, I'm going to give an example of a client that I worked with, an amazing girl. She started off in property investing, which is one of the industries I'm sort of most rooted in. And she had come from abroad. She was Eastern European. She was massively into astrology. It was a big passion of hers. She was a teacher by 9-to-5 profession, but she was kind of doing this property investing side hustle just to have a bit of passive income. So it wasn't going to be a main thing. And what she wanted was confidence to kind of go out on social media and perform all she is. But she was like, she absolutely hated herself because she's like, I don't want people knowing I'm in property because they're going to make all these judgments. And if I post something, I normally take it down after 5 minutes, or people won't understand my accent. And, she just couldn't see how she could step into this world of property without being, I don't know, just judged, I suppose. She lacked confidence. So what we did when we went through her rainbow spectrum, we identified all these amazing elements about her. Her accent actually became the thing that she played upon. Her interest in astrology fed through into the branding of her property company and all of her project designs, because that zodiac element of what she does was so important. She started her social media journey on a new moon because that meant something to her.
When you say colour, literally colour is a metaphor for all the elements of your life and how you channel your energy.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. That is
So
it. It's your personality, life experience, energy, your DNA, what you're good at, it's your flavors.
And you mentioned earlier, one thing you said what defines you is what gives you energy, which could be the introvert or the extrovert thing, and therein sits a very big link. One of the other things that you talked about when you were on stage is you were talking about, and I can't think of the exact phrase, so you'll have to correct me here, but you were talking about, sexual. And I don't think you meant the obvious statement, but what did you mean? Tell us a bit more about that.
Sexual energy is something that I have been thinking about for many years, and I'm now starting to talk about with my professional speaking hat on. The way I see it is, one of our colors is that we are all sexual beings. And this isn't about the physical act of sex, it's about the energy of sex that each of us have within us. And I read this book many years ago called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it was a book written in 1937. And the only chapter that captured my attention, John, was chapter 11, which was all around sex transmutation and how the most successful people in history have had high sex drives or high sexual energy. And instead of just putting that exclusively into a physical space, what they've done is transmuted it into a creative space.
About the way they channel their energy.
Yeah, they've channeled that energy into their business, or, making money, or being a good public speaker. He talks about famous orators and architects and painters and poets and, big figures in literature and war, that these people had notable high sexual energy, but instead of just sort of almost limiting it to the physical act, they've transmuted it into creative output.
Great way to look at it. I'm aware that many introverts I come across, Joe, will sit there and say they don't have all this sexual energy. They're kind of quiet and shy people, and you just said we've all got it. How do those two add together?
Sexual energy doesn't sit on the introvert or extrovert spectrum. It's completely exempt from it. That's what's amazing about it. Because it's inherent in all of us, it doesn't need to manifest in a way where you're charging about in social scenes, just kind of like being creative and, being visible. And it's nothing to do with it. What it is, it's about going inside yourself and being aware of that sexual energy that you have. And there are many, many ways you can do that, which we don't have time to explore today. It's about tapping into that energy that sits within you and then putting it into a creative endeavor. Now, that creative endeavor might be a very quiet practice. It might be writing a book, or it might be a presentation that you're delivering in front of a room, which introverts can do just as well, if not better, than extroverts. It might be that, I don't know, that piece, that project that you've always wanted to start, but you just haven't. So it's the application of the energy, not necessarily the personality of the person who's manifesting it, that is at stake. Because it comes from a very sexual place. What's very interesting about sexual energy is, out of all of human desires, it is the strongest. Above hunger, above thirst, it is that driver to seek satisfaction, to procreate, is more powerful than our other primitive needs. And therefore it is sexual. And it is about challenge it because it's so powerful, and because all of us have it within us as sexual beings. It means everybody can tap into it. And because it has that extensive power, it means you can create to that level. You can vibrate sexually and have that creative output to meet it at that higher level. That's potential beyond belief if you just tap into it.
Yeah. Kind of wrapping up a little bit now and saying, if I was an introvert and you were talking to me about how I can tap into that, could you give me one tip?
I think it's about auditing your energy levels. So introverts are very thoughtful generally. They're very thoughtful in mind. They often think before they act. The whole practice of tapping into sexual energy is a very inward experience. And what it involves, and there are many ways you can do it, but this is just one example of it, is going into yourself, taking a moment. Let's talk about breath work. Breath work is a great way to connect to your sexual energy. Now, for me personally, if I'm doing this, I will either sit in a room by myself, cross-legged on the floor, and I will either place my hands on my genitalia, or I will do it just on my stomach, and I will just take deep breaths in and out. And I will imagine between my mind and down there in my private parts, for want of a better word, there is a channeling of energy that is coming up from me, and it's going into my mind. And I will spend about 5 minutes just channeling that energy, but I won't waste it. Once I've had that 5 minutes of channeling, I will then go and do something deliberately creative. I will start writing a journal. I will start working on that project, putting the presentation together. It's a channeling.
And as you said, it's an introvert thing because we are very good at reflecting inwards. And how about if you're a leader and you wanted to help some of your team to perform at a higher energy level?
Okay, I've got a bit of an out of the box technique, and I don't know how this would be delivered in a workplace without probably someone calling HR.
Yeah, well, that's what I feared when asking you the question. I was thinking, no, you can't go around putting your hands on genitalia. We haven't even spoken about genitalia on this podcast. But...
Well, there you go. There's always a first, isn't there? So I do like to trailblaze, John. No, I was just thinking about this. So one of the things you can do is, right, so when you are engaging in a sexual activity, so the physical sexual act, whether it's just alone or whether it's with somebody else, you link it to a goal that you want to achieve. So you in your mind know that there is something at work or something in your professional life that you are looking to achieve. And what you do is you start to visualize it. This is before you engage in any form of sexual act, but you start to visualize it. You start to see what achieving it looks like in your mind. And then what you do is when you are actually in an intimate situation, is although you are engaged in that intimate situation, you envisage succeeding and achieving it in line with your sexual experience. So when you reach climax, you actually visualize achieving your task. You will then have a positive sexual energy association with that specific task. It is a driver. So how you would then, I guess, task that to your team
Yeah,
as a leader.
The heart of it, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking of the complexity of just multitasking for a second. I know. I can't do that. But anyway, keep going. How do I link it to team?
I do think there is something to be said of this, because I think sexual energy, or just talking about sex generally, is such a taboo, particularly for women. We still, are subject to judgment and objectification and all of those terrible things that culture and society have enforced upon us. But one of my missions is to make people more okay about talking about this, so that it doesn't become, trite, or, talking about it for titillation, for want of a better word, that we're doing it for some sort of provocation. That actually, if this is one of the most powerful human drivers on earth, how does it not have relevance and space in the success of an organization, or in the success or development of a human being? And about normalizing that narrative without it becoming, distasteful. I think that's really important. And that's what I want to talk about more and more as I move forward in my professional speaking journey. It's important.
Jo, we have come to the end, but before we go, I know that some people are going to want to get back in touch with you. What's the best place for them to do that?
The best way to find me is to look up Jo Lightfoot Official on Instagram, Facebook, but in particular, LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to talk.
Thanks, John.
I found that fascinating. I had absolutely no idea where the discussion would go. Maybe multitasking so you can link your goals the act, and your team will be too much. But Joe makes an extremely good point. How can we bring out the most important energy our team have and transmute it into business? The strong link between channeling our energy, the introvert and the extroversion definitions, and that point that bubbly and chatty people can also be introvert. Thank you, Joe. I really enjoyed it. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Peter. Is it true that introverts tend to ask a lot of questions? I asked around for a couple of quick responses from some of the others on this trip, proving that introverts do ask questions. First answer. Introverts do not ask too many questions, but when they ask, the question is well thought out and well presented. Well, that was a great answer. Second answer. I find that extroverts overall tend to ask more questions on average, but there are many extreme extroverts who ask loads of questions, and extreme introverts that ask very few. Personally, I think it's contextual. Introversion is not about not talking, although many introverts love to understand in detail, and questioning is one way of doing that. In an environment with lots of extroverts and loud egos flying around, and those questions and thoughts might not get realised all the time. And yeah, that might be my reminder to return downstairs to the loud discussions about today's skiing.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourinTrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.